Yes, we're live. It's me, Martin Cross, on Cross's Corner with Alex Partridge today. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Crossy. How are you doing?
I'm doing very good. Really, it's such a pleasure and a privilege to talk to you. I've been really looking forward to this so much. Very excited. We were talking before. For people that might not know Alex, you might sort of know he was kind of, you can see the picture behind of the blades with the GB sticker and the World Championship certificate. By my reckoning, 2 Olympic Games, medalled in both silver and bronze, 3 World Championship gold medals, I think, and a World Championship bronze and silver medal. Started rowing back in, is that right?
I think there are a few more medals in there, but yeah, I can't remember myself. So.
Yeah, under 23 medals, junior medals. Rowed with anybody who's, everybody in the British team. We're going to see what kind of a personality he is. I wrote down some words. I think inspirational is a massive word connected with you, Alex. You're quite vocal in a crew. I know I've rowed with you in some of the old man's rowing that we do now these days, and an intensity. You're very articulate, such a thoughtful man, friendly, and really unique. And I think we're going to have a whale of a time today.
Yeah. Well, no, Crossy, thank you very much. They're very kind words. And yeah, it's really special to have rowed with so many great people over those years. I was lucky enough to cross just as Steve was exiting the sport, in 2000. I was just cracking into the team and rowed with some amazing characters, and then a lot of the kind of new names, and even some of the people in the squad now. But what's so great is we have our little leg ends group down at Molesey, which has allowed me to row with people like yourself and Johnny, although some people would argue maybe that's not no. But I think it's so cool to have rowed with all these different people in our sport from all over the world, and I think that's a really, really special group to be part of.
Yeah, and you've been quite active today. I don't know if you're out for a run this morning, but I gather you've just come out of the Thames in Henley, which I don't know if it's the coldest day of the year so far, but do you want to just explain what you're doing swimming in the river on a day like today?
Yeah, I can. I'm not quite sure entirely myself, but no, I'm a massive advocate of well-being and mental health, and there's a guy that I follow called Wim Hof. He's the Iceman, and he's got a breathing methodology and technique that I think is really powerful for looking at reducing inflammation within the body, but also anxiety and stress. But then the other element that he has is this cold therapy. And so for the last 8 days, I've been jumping in the river and trying to stay submerged for between 5 and 10 minutes. So I've literally just got back off my lunch break, where I dashed to the river, jumped in, and stayed in. And so I might be still shivering, but you feel incredible. And actually, I have to say my body feels great, by doing these things, by getting up early in the morning, seeing the sunrise. I try to do that every day and run out in the woods, in the trails. When I do those things and I do something crazy like jumping in the river, my day is okay and I'm okay. But if I don't do those things just because time gets on top of me or family commitments or whatever, you know what? There is a big difference. And so it's just a simple thing to do. But if you do it, it makes everything else all right.
So what kind of space are you in now? I mean, chatting to you seem to be in a good space, Alex.
No, I'm in a really good space. I mean, it's no secret. I had a really difficult time in 2016. I did some pretty silly things and regret a lot my sort of actions and behaviors, but I went through a real tough process mentally. And a lot of that was to do with sport, and a lot of that was to do with just understanding me and life and life outside of sport, and kind of lots of things that have happened. And so it's a process. I spent a lot of time looking at what is well-being, what are the components that make up your positive, mental health. And it's really interesting because if you finish sport as an athlete and you think all these things, you think I'm invincible, I'm so aware of what my body's doing today, I'm so in tune with, and you're this incredible finely tuned machine when you're an athlete. But also you have like a really, really clear purpose. Every day you wake up, it's pretty simple. I'm trying to win Olympic gold medal. I'm trying to get into the boat that's going to win Olympic gold medal. So your whole life can be revolving around that. But what's interesting is that I thought I knew who I was. I thought I knew what, my values were, why I was motivated to do all this kind of stuff in sport. But once you remove that, I didn't actually have a clue. I didn't have a clue who I was. I didn't have a clue what my values were in life, and why I did certain things, and really what my purpose was in the world and all that kind of stuff. So I had to go through that process, and it was not nice for myself, and it wasn't nice for a lot of people around me. And I was very, very lucky that they still supported me through that process. But then by going through that process, you then kind of understand, okay, right, these are the components. This is like my training program outside of sport for life, my training program for the components and the elements that I need to be the best me. And for me, that's, that is doing exercise every day in the morning, first thing when the sunrise is coming up. It is doing crazy stuff like jumping in the river when it's -1 degrees outside, and I'm still shivering now, but they make me operate at my best self for everybody else. So yeah, I'm in a good place.
That's great to know, because I do remember talking to you. I think it would have been back in 2016 or maybe a little bit before then, where you were, you talked about how it was coming out of the Caversham system. And I think there was an image of the gate sort of banging shut, and that was it. You had to give back your key fob. But, there was a life that you had at Caversham, and it was kind of barred off from you. And you were in this corporate world where, Excel spreadsheets or PowerPoints with the ergos in effect that you were doing, you were measured by. I mean, it was a very, very compelling interview. You were talking very intensely about that experience.
Yeah, I mean, look, I wouldn't want today to be all about the kind of transition from sport to life after sport, but it's a well-trodden path and a well-trodden, well-read story now, where we see athletes coming out of intense systems like we have with rowing, with British rowing. And, maybe in during that time, I had a pretty intense view about that kind of cut off of the umbilical cord, I guess, to your life when they shut that gate at Caversham. And yeah, it was difficult for me. I look at it in a slightly different way now. I understand it in a different way. In terms of, it's not, I don't blame, Caversham or British rowing for my difficult experience. I think it's something that if you're not aware of the journey that you're going to have to go on afterwards, it's going to be difficult for everyone, particularly with the intensity that's created in that system and that program that you have to run to be able to create success in British rowing and in sport, in rowing in this country. I mean, I do think that the level now with what the athletes have to train and the intensity that they have to focus, there is a degree of there is only a few ways to do it. And if you don't do it that way, then you're probably not going to create the success,
I was going to say, can you conceive of something else that might have been added in to when you were part of Caversham that could have helped things for you? Or, there's now, we can talk a lot about how British rowing is looking now, but there's a sense of a more sort of cuddly feel around athlete welfare, I guess. There might have been.
I think we have to be really careful now when we look at sport and performance in sport, and athlete welfare. Athlete welfare and performance are two different things, and I think to create this world where it is, all cuddly, and is the athlete, there is a degree and an element within sport and within pushing athletes to success that you have to take them outside of their comfort zone, and you have to push different buttons that to get them there, and sometimes sorry, Martin.
Yeah, I've got that.
Cross a bit of lovely feedback here.
Is that any different, Alex?
Yeah, that's much.
Yeah.
So yeah, what I was going to say is that I think there's a balance between athlete welfare, I think, and human welfare, and looking at that, and having having the support system that specifically focuses on that, alongside the performance system. And I'm not talking about athletes, support. I'm just talking they're very different things, but we need to be careful that we don't cost the performance element, at the benefit of, let's just be all soft and cuddly and make sure everyone's, because to achieve performance in rowing in particular, there's a lot of pain. It's really hard. And sometimes you have to get someone to help you get to places that you didn't think you could get to. And I know Jürgen's now sadly left the British rowing team, and that was one of the things that he was excellent at doing. And I didn't see eye to eye with him all the time, but he definitely pushed my buttons to get more out of me than I ever thought I could. And you hear about stories about Mike Spracklin in Canada and how he pushed them, and so it's a really fine line. I think we need to be careful we don't go too far the other way as well.
Yeah, well, you had a very interesting relationship with Jürgen, because he selected you for that Olympic 4 in 2004, which sadly you couldn't complete that Olympic cycle because of your collapsed lung. And then he put you in the 4 after that in 2005 with Hodge and Williams and Reed. And then he dropped you from the 4 in 2008, and you were in the 8 that year. And then it was very close whether you'd be in the 4 or the 8 in 2012. And so you've got this very interesting relationship with Jürgen, where he's put you in boats, and he's I suppose dropped you from boats.
Yeah, I mean, I have enormous respect and admiration, and I just think Jürgen is a fantastic coach. We had a love-hate relationship at times, but I think the best athletes and coaches often do, because I probably pushed his buttons the wrong way sometimes, and he did the same. He did the same to me. But what he always knew is that I would always show up, and I'd deliver my best that I could, and I always knew that he would do the same. So I have a huge amount of respect for my time that I spent with Jürgen. But the reality is he was the chief coach of the British team, and if you look back retrospectively, that's a pretty ruthless role that you have to have, because everyone in your team is training hard. Everyone wants a spot. Everyone wants a spot in that seat, and not everyone can have that spot, and you have to be the person who has to deliver that message. Sometimes that message can be delivered in different ways. The reality is you have to make that decision. And my performance and my development in rowing over those years from 2000 all the way to 2012, performance isn't linear all the time. You get better, but you have bits where you go down. And I had some down days, and they were just some of the wrong days that were important for selection. So and there's lots and lots of components that make up selection for a crew. It's not just about, who's physically strong enough, or who's won this seat race today, or whatever. You have to look at the full psychological dynamic of the crew. And I think, the reality is that in the decision that he made in 2008, he could see that there was, psychological stress within the crew. We'd been together a long time. We'd been winning for a long time. but we'd also weren't working as well as we had done, as a unit in the early years. And a great way of dealing with that is putting in someone different. So, it's pretty simple in that way. And I don't hold it against him, because I had a fantastic time in that in 2008. That was an absolutely brilliant boat to be in. And I wouldn't have gone on to be, I think, a much better athlete over the next 4 years unless I'd gone through that experience and been in that 8. I don't think I was rowing particularly well in 2007 from a technical perspective. And then getting put in that 8, and being coached by people like Mark Banks and John West, they put a lot of effort into my technique, and I think I then rowed a lot better subsequently.
So I think we can talk about you in those crews. I just wanted to ask you now. Jürgen Grobber is now no longer chief coach. There's been a lot of changes since the new performance director Brendan Purcell has been in. We know he's not currently at work. He's off work at the moment. So we hope everything's going well with Brendan and wish you well. But what do you make out of what's going on with British rowing at the moment from your position, Alex?
I have to say I'm quite worried. The fact that you've got one of the best rowing coaches in the world who's basically sat on his sofa less than 4 miles away from the British rowing team, and you don't have the performance director who is supposed to be running the helm. I know they've got lots of good coaches down there, but it just doesn't seem to make sense to me. In the year leading up to the Olympic Games, I don't see enough representation within British rowing and the board of international experience of international rowing. So I think there's a big disconnect there to governance from a corporate perspective to actually understanding what international rowing is about. I think that's quite dangerous, and I'm really worried about what's happening with the clubs. I just don't think there's enough inter-club competition. I don't think there's enough distribution of athletes across the clubs, and therefore the quality and of the racing domestically is not high enough. And so I'm pretty worried. Yeah,
it's what you wish for the best, and if the Olympics in Tokyo do happen, but it's quite a job. I think Jürgen had identified, hadn't he, an 8 that he was going to take of young guys and Mo Sabihi, and that was going to be his crew to try and win a gold medal. But it's hard to see how that can actually go forward to win in this setup that they've got now.
Look, I mean, it's up to, at the end of the day, performance is up to the athletes, and you as an athlete and good leaders within the kind of groups that I've been part of can drive that success from an athlete perspective if they have a really good program to follow. And so it is still up to the athletes, how they train, the intensity with what they train, the culture that they create within their own group. But it's very difficult because without, and they do have a lot of good coaches down there supporting them. So don't get me wrong. I don't think they don't have good coaches down there. But the one thing that Jürgen was so good at, especially in that last year, which was so crucial, the Olympic year, we always knew as an athlete in Jürgen's program, you were training for the Olympic Games, and you knew that you at the Olympic Games would be the fittest that you could be in that 4 years. You might have ups and downs along the way, but you knew then you would perform. And the psychological pressures and the kind of silliness that happens as an athlete, the kind of infighting within crews because things that are not important suddenly become important. You create your own problems. The reality is it's pretty simple. Those problems don't need to be a factor in your performance. They just need to get on and row and make it really simple, but they do become a problem. And that's where the leadership of Jürgen was so great, because he could just squash those out, or say things that just got everybody, on the right track. So, I wish all the athletes the best of luck, and I think it's still up to the athletes to decide how they can do it. But they need to be focused They need to bring the intensity, the same intensity that they think that they would have had if Jurgen was there, because that was what you had to do. You knew that if you didn't deliver every day, you were always worried that Jurgen would drop you. And I think the other thing is that the athletes need to decide to keep it simple, so they keep those problems that we all have experienced in our rowing career that kind of make crews go slower. If they decide, look, we're not going to allow that to happen, then they'll succeed.
Yeah. And I want to take you back to the start of your rowing career. Just maybe how come? I mean, why rowing? Why did you and this sport find yourself together? What was it that drew you into it?
Well, I love playing rugby. Actually, when I first, because I came over to school in the UK when I was about 14, and loved playing rugby. And one of my mates at school said, "Oh, do you want to do this thing called rowing? It keeps you really fit through the summer months, and then you can come back and be stronger for rugby." I was like, "All right, that sounds like a great idea." And so I got into it that way, and it was very early on in my rowing career. I think it was the next year, Redgrave and Pinsent won in Atlanta, and they were the only gold medal. Yeah. And I watched that race, and I watched when Steve just collapsed over the oar, and I've always been massively into sort of how far you can push yourself, you're physically push yourself. And then I saw this Goliath of a man, Sir Steve Redgrave, we all know now, slumped over and having won that race and saying, if anybody sees me in the boat, my permission to shoot me and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to go to the Olympic Games and I want to win an Olympic gold medal. And
that early.
Yeah. And so I made the decision then, and that was sort of 15. And if you ask anybody who knew me growing up, if they asked me, what I was doing and when I did the kind of junior trials and all that kind of stuff, I was like, well, this is just part of the process. I need to do this to go to the Olympics. So this is what I'm doing. And I just knew, and I just devoted everything from a very early age to do that.
And you kind of were successful in the junior system, again, successful in the under-23s. And then you picked up your first World Championship medal in 2003 as part of that young 8.
Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky. So my rowing career actually was pretty linear. From a junior, I got into the junior team. I got a medal coached by Mark Banks. Mark Banks played a large role in my rowing career over many, many years. I then nearly got gold in my final year, at school in the Junior World Championships. Then I went off to Oxford Brookes University and had great, sort of learned how to really, really train hard under Richard Spratley and all the guys that were down there. And I got a medal in my first year at under-23s, and then I got another medal in the next year, and then we got invited to the World Championships, and I got another medal at the World Championships that summer. And it was like, this is just amazing. And then we won Henley that same year. I was like, well, this is just so easy. And then I got into the 8 in 2002, and we had a tough season, actually. We had a really, really tough season where we came last in most of the races with some of the guys who won the Olympics in 2000. And that was when I started to kind of really understand, okay, this is not so simple. And Steve Gunn kind of really galvanized a young group of athletes that year. And they kind of took the guys who won the gold out of the 8. And we then had this kind of rogue group of young athletes with guys like Ben Birch and Robin Board Taylor and Joe von Moltzen. And, we all had nothing to lose. So it was that group that then got the medal in 2003 and qualified for the Olympics. And that was, I still remember that race, like crossing the finish line in Milan. Nobody in the team thought we had any chance of getting a medal. And there we were beating the world champions, the year before, the Germans, and we qualified for the Olympics. And I just remember the feeling of being like, oh my goodness, we just qualified for the Olympics.
Wow.
And then the next year it just kind of carried on getting even better. Like I got in the pair with Andy Hodge. He was, early in his career. We won trials. And then I got asked to be in the forward Pinsent and Cracknell, and it was just like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. But then, the reality, everybody knows, around about Lucerne time, just before Lucerne, I had a stress fracture in my ribs, and in the race in Lucerne, I ended up collapsing both lungs. Sorry,
both lungs.
Both lungs, yeah. And I still remember the final. So we won the semi, and I didn't feel right. And we, yeah, it just didn't feel right. And I remember going to the start line, of the final, and we went off, like as hard as we could. And I remember just pushing, but feeling like no power could really come out. I was just kind of like this rabbit just moving up and down the slide, but no ability to kind of produce any power. And we ended up coming third, and then losing to the Canadians and the Americans. But I was in all sorts of trouble, couldn't breathe. And then when I got back to the UK, I got sent for more tests, and they said, look, you've collapsed your lungs. So that was just before we flew out to altitude for the Olympics. So that was my first shot at the Olympics. But the reality is, like, it was very, very tough. But one of the cool things about rowing is we all care so much about each other, and each other's success. So it's even when you have that failure in yourself, all I wanted was success for that four. So Matt and James and Steve. Yeah, all I wanted to do was for them to win. And the same for the guys that were in the 8, that had a terrible Olympics that summer. It just didn't work out. And it's really admirable in our sport that, you so many people who are spares at the Olympic Games. Like, I can think of, Marcus Bateman, Alex Gregory when he was on the sidelines in Beijing, Noddy, who, for London, they could quite easily be in any of those boats. It's a marginal decision, and how supportive all those guys and girls have been. And I think it's just because we all care so much that we want each other to succeed. And that's what's the beautiful thing about rowing, is that, you're fully accountable and committed to each other, because you can't go faster than anybody else in your boat. You all have to do it together, or not at all.
Yeah.
And it's this great community, and it's this helping of each other. And I know I've talked a lot, Martin, but there's a reason. Is this helping of each other and helping your fellow crewmates to succeed and to get more out of each other, and to get through those challenges together, or for them to get through their challenges when they're a challenge for them. And when I went through this process in 2016 of trying to understand who I was and why I loved rowing so much, it wasn't because I loved racing or I loved getting a gold medal. It's because I just loved helping my fellow crewmate. I loved seeing them succeed. I loved the journey. I love the journey that we went on. The best times, if I look back in rowing, were the training camps we went on. Those terrible, terrible, tough days where you're at 2,500 meters up in Silvretta, and it's hailing across the lake, and you're soaking wet, and you've got to do your 4th 2K piece, and you know what I mean. You're just exhausted, but you get through. You do it because you're all there to do it together, and you get through it together. And it's that journey that I miss, and that I think is so great. And actually, the most hollow and shallow bits of our sport for me was actually standing there on the podium.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because you just stood there, and it's like, oh, right, it's over, and yeah, so I just thought that might be an interesting thing to share, because I think a lot of people who are fortunate enough to still be able to do the sport now, I think it's worth just taking a step back and recognizing the training that you're doing and the time that you're having with each other, and just appreciate that, because that's just what's so awesome about the journey, that you're on, because it doesn't last forever. I remember Greg Searle, he once said to me when he came into the team in 2012, and he'd come from working at Lane 4, and he just loved the training, and he loved the whole thing, and his performance was incredible for somebody who was his age. And I remember talking to different people about it. It's like, and Jurgen just loved him being there, so much as well. And there was two things. It was one, because Jurgen loved it because Greg was finally properly doing Jurgen's training program. But also, what Greg said is, he's just like, this is just so much better than, anything else you can do in life, in work, in the working world. You just have no idea how great this is. And I remember listening to him going, oh, you're only saying this because now Jurgen loves you and you're doing you're doing his program properly and all that kind of stuff. But actually, he was right. He was genuinely right. That's one of the most precious things we can do in our time. Anyway.
So how does anyone replace that, or is it something that you can replace? Do you have to find something else that sort of motivates you? What's that process like for you?
Yeah, so I did struggle with that for a long time after sport, and I think that was part of the thing that I was difficult up to 2016, and actually why I started rowing again in 2016, to kind of try and refine some of that commitment, that journey together, all that kind of stuff. But what I do now is, lots of people want to stay healthy. They want to have positive mental health, positive physical health, and the biggest thing that stops them getting out the door and going to see the sunrise on a freezing cold morning like it was this morning is themselves. But if because they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to turn off the alarm and I'm going to roll over. But what's interesting is, if I say to somebody, I'm going to go for a run tomorrow morning, do you want to meet at 6 o'clock? And they say, yeah. 99% of the time, I am always going to be there to meet that person to go for that run, or for that cycle, or for that swim in the river that's crazy and it's going to be uncomfortable for the first whatever. And that's because there's an accountability. There's an accountability to each other. There's a commitment to each other. There's a true social connection to each other. And this is all positive. These are all core components of like positive well-being and positive mental health. And so if I commit to that person, and then I show up, and then guess what? I'm sharing that journey with that individual, whether it's just running through the woods, or swimming in the river, or it could even be just playing a game of tennis or whatever. And that's what I try to recreate, in my personal life with sport now. Is, we have it with the old boys rowing group that we have, the leg ends. The fact that there's a Zoom erg every Thursday night or Tuesday night, that anybody can dial into from around the world. Guess what? I don't want to do an ergo on Thursday night, but if I know that you're going to be there to do it, I'm going to show up, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to feel great. And that's how I try and recreate some of that journey in my personal life, and that's just made me a lot happier. And then guess what? That infectiousness of that enjoyment, because I'm getting other people to be there, I'm creating accountability, those groups grow, more people can share those experiences. And guess what? That's exactly what we did with rowing. The squad grew, the experiences were shared, and then people would keep doing it, and they repeat it, and then they do it for other people. So yeah.
There was that question that Ian Weir asked that, just before we went on air, I kind of mentioned to you about sort of motivation. He's, moved from London up to Tyne, and I think he's struggling to find motivation, thinking obsessively about racing, the Jackson Trophy for the Head of the River race and so on. Could you offer him any advice? It sounds like you just have, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the other things that I've done. So what was interesting when I first finished sport after London 2012, like I wanted to stay fit. I wanted to compete, but I just really, really struggled with the motivation. I really struggled with the motivation because everything was just not as good as, the Olympics. I wasn't as good as I was when I was training for the Olympics, naturally, because we're not as fit and, not training as hard and all that kind of stuff. Always looking at my watch, what time am I doing? How fast am I going? How fast am I running? How fast am I cycling? What's my power? Blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And I eventually got so frustrated with it, I just stopped. And then I got really fat and heavy. And then, that's when a lot of the kind of other repercussions of sort of mental health kicked in. But what I did when I revisited getting fit again is I thought, do you know what, I'm just going to do this for the purity of the movement and the purity of the moment. So if I'm running now, sometimes, yes, I will look at my watch, how fast I'm going. But if I'm running now, I will just really consciously try and be in the moment to understand like what's going on in the surroundings around me, like really look at the sunrise, really enjoy the person that I might be running with if I am, or if I'm running, to just really try and feel that complete freedom in my body. And that is just amazing, right? Because there is no result needed, but it brings, a lot of people talk about mindfulness and the practice of mindfulness. Well, if you can do that in your sport, whether it's rowing or cycling, and really try and be in the moment, it's just an incredible feeling. And that gets you through those days where, it's difficult to be motivated. And it's really difficult to be motivated right now because it's very difficult to understand, well, what are my goals? Like, what can I commit to? Like, what event can I do? Because we don't know if there are going to be any events. And I've talked to lots of friends, and, it's a real frustration. Some people who are training for triathlons and stuff, and they've had all those canceled, and you can see it in their performance and their training, it's all over the shop. So why train for an event that's driven by anybody else? Why not create your own? So on the winter solstice on the 21st of December, guess what? That's the shortest day of the year, and I'm going to run all daylight hours of the year. No one's going to tell me to do that. No one's going to, I don't have to pay to do that. But that's a big challenge, right? That's a big deal. For me, I'm 100 kilos for a run for like 8 hours. There's going to be some mushroom clouds all across the Ridgeway. But but that's how I do it. And so those are the other things that you can do, is put in place those own personal events. But also, I've told you now I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm now accountable to you and whoever else is watching now that I've got to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So maybe that might help.
Yeah. Take you back, Alex, to getting into this four with Hodgie and Pete Reed and Stevie Williams in 2005, 2006. Pretty scorching four, won the World Championships both of those years. It must have seemed like coming back after Athens that things had really turned around for you, that, things were going really well in those years.
Yeah, I mean, we had a great run. We had 39 races unbeaten.
Wow,
and 39 for nearly 3 years. The only race that we lost in 3 years was the final of the World Championships in Munich. But I think, and it was awesome. I mean, it was, that first year was just awesome. Some of the rowing that we did in 2005, just, the boat just felt so easy. But I think I got a bit lost. I think I got a bit lost from a psychological perspective. And I heard you talking to Kath Bishop about this the other day. I became so fixated on, the only success is winning. The only success is being in the top boat. This is the boat I'm going to be in. It's the Cox's Four. We're going to win every race between now and the Olympics, and we're going to win the Olympics. And I became lost about exactly what I'm just telling you about, which is the purity of the sport, the enjoyment of each other.
Yeah.
Egos definitely started to get bigger because we won more and more. We got a lot of, back then the top boat got a lot of the press. And I hold my hand up. I definitely got lost with actually, how can we keep him? And like you said at the beginning, I have a lot of intensity, and so I was just brought more and more intensity to this four, and as opposed to just enjoying the moment a bit more. If it's going fast, why do you have to try and keep on doing it to make it go slow? Try and just enjoy being in that, in that moment. I mean, but these are all great, easy things to say in retrospect.
Important though.
But important, yeah, important. It's and this is what I think is so cool about now. And I think this is one thing you asked me at the beginning. What can rowing or sport do that wasn't there before? I also work with. I've just been accepted onto the True Athlete program, which is this mentor-mentee program, as one of the mentors. And I'm super, super excited to do that, because I think another big part of mental health and well-being is helping others. By helping others, you help yourself.
Yeah.
That's why, I work with WageStream, because we do it's a social purpose business, and we're providing a massive solution for society around their financial health. But the point being is that I think that this True Athlete program, if they could have this, if we could have had athlete mentors who'd been there and been through it, talking to us more, and just to be able to reflect on their experience and not have that threat of that sort of coach athlete relationship of, or maybe I'll say the wrong thing, or, that freedom of being able to ask those questions. I know you and I used to talk every now and again, but having a more of a structured program to go through, I think would be so valuable for the athletes now.
Wow, that's great. I'm really pleased to hear that, Alex. It sounds like you had a bit of a reawakening. You spoke of how it was in 2008, being in the team and what you've learned from it. And I remember that 8 racing, particularly the heat in Beijing. I mean, I think it was one of the best British 8s that I've seen in terms of how that heat was. And I've got a notion that there was a regret, certainly with you, but the 8, about the way you raced the final, and which the Canadians won and you took a silver medal. Looking back on that, what's your perspective now?
Well, that 8 was awesome. I mean, both 8, the London 8 was great as well. They're very different, completely different culturally, but that 8 was such a blast. Because, and by the way, that 8 was more than just the 9 people that were in it on that day. A huge part of that 8 were both Robin Bourne-Taylor and Tom Salisbury, who were in the pair. We rotated that 8 through the season, but we got to this situation where we got to Beijing, and we knew we were going well. We'd just been progressing on training camp. And we were massively the underdogs. And our hotel was just behind the start line in Beijing. So we got to Beijing, we're the underdogs, and we did that heat, and we absolutely walloped it out the blocks. I mean, I think we won by like 7 seconds or something. It was huge, and it was so easy. Like, physically, I got off the course, I felt like I'd done nothing. And then we saw the time, and we were a couple of seconds faster than the Canadians in their heat. And suddenly you go from this real underdog to, holy cow, we've really got a shot here. If we don't mess this up, we could be Olympic champions. That's pretty cool. But what was interesting is back then, which was different to London, is that the 8 was always on the Sunday. So we basically raced our first race on the Monday, and then we didn't race again for a week.
Yeah.
And our rooms were right there behind the start line. So for a week, you go and do your training session on the lake. Right, okay, what do we need to focus on? Okay, well, we need to go faster out the block, so we need to go faster than the Canadians. Okay, well, no, duh. Canadians are going to bolt it out of the blocks. Well, guess what we got to do? And we're listening all week to this, attention, day after day after day. And you could just feel the tension in the crew, although everyone's trying to stay cool, everyone's trying to keep the same like jovial underdog atmosphere. And there was some, Rick Eggington, Tom Lucy, some guys just, always up to no good and tricks and whatever, trying not to get too bored, trying not to touch anyone because we're putting alcohol gel on our hands the whole time. And, because we heard about this virus that broke out amongst the other team. So all this kind of stuff. So you're just managing that stress for the week. And I have to say, when we got to that Sunday, and with the last race of the day, I walked into the Olympic Park, through the gate, and Mark and Zach were crossing the finish line, winning their gold. The 4 had won the gold the day before. We'd beaten all these crews on training camp on percentage. It was like, oh my goodness, here we go. And I just think that, you know, the kind of the pressure and the tension was huge. Jurgen spoke to us before the race. That was something that had not happened before in any of our other races. I don't think that was necessarily the right thing for us going into the final, but that's what happened. I seem to remember even Rick got into the boat the wrong way around or something like that. Even when we put, you know, it was just like super pressure. And then we paddled up to the start, and it was like dead silence, not at all like what it was before. And yeah, we went out the blocks. You know, we got to the start line, went out the blocks, and within the first couple of strokes, there was a bit of a dodgy stroke. And got a bit caught, and then it just kind of within 5 strokes, we just tensed up, and you know, the next 20-30 strokes weren't good enough. And then the Canadian slipped away, and that's, you know, that's really how fine it is in the Olympic final. One bad stroke, and that's it.
Yeah.
Start in the 8, you know. So yeah. So I mean, when you say a little bit of regret is or not regret, disappointment, I think, you know, we were all super pumped to come away with Olympic silver medal, but I think at the time we definitely knew we could have done better. I think we still know we could have done better.
Yeah.
Unless you have a you know, unless all your strokes are good, it's difficult to look back and go, well, do you know what, that's the result. But that's sport. I actually look back at it now, and I just think it was incredibly awesome to deliver the result we got, because if you look at the race, I thought we were way further ahead of the Americans than we were. It was only that much.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How much influence did that result have on the way you raced the 8s final in 2012? Because, you know, there's a number of you know, yourself, you mentioned Rick Edgington.
Yeah.
Was it Langers too had been in that 8? Because that 2012 race was a remarkable, you know, final in terms of racing to watch. How influenced were you by what had happened 4 years before?
Well, I think firstly, I kind of want to address this. So I heard, you know, your great interview with Kath Bishop, and she's just written that great book on the long win, and, you know, looking at sort of this win at all costs concept and mentality. And I think the reality is of sport, you want to win. I mean, the objective of sport is to win. It's not to come second. But I really understand what she means about, you know, the wrong culture is, you know, are you successful as an individual based on just your results of being winning or not, is not the right thing. And it can take all sorts of different people to be winners. You know, you don't have to be this person who you know, sulks and throws their toys out the pram if they don't have a win, because that doesn't mean you care enough. So yeah, I think there still needs to be a lot of looking at how sport and groups manage their athletes when they try and achieve success. But in rowing, and definitely under Jurgen's program, and because of the great work that yourself, you know, you and Steve, you set it up in 1984, you know, and ever since then, the flagship of performance in rowing is gold, right? Yeah. And Jurgen's system got stronger and stronger and stronger, that we were able to achieve more and more and more golds, and more golds across the team, multiple boat classes, etc. And Jurgen has such an amazing track record of golds. Your measure of performance is gold. And so we had, and certainly back then, and also I think for the next 4 years, we had enough athletes that you could say that we had the potential to win gold. You know, definitely within that London 2012 8. If we got everything right, if we didn't have the injury through the season, I think we definitely could have won gold.
Really?
100%. Yeah. But we, you know, that's the things that I explained earlier, is that, you know, one, we lost Stan early in the season to a back injury, so he didn't get a race that entire World Cup season. So his first race of the Olympics over the international season, even in a senior boat, was the Olympic heat. So that's one element. And then two, we spent so much time changing the crew around that season between World Cups, and results were all over the place. And then we lost our confidence as athletes. We lost our confidence within each other. And then we started creating our own problems, which were things that didn't need to be there. So I'm just trying to highlight that those are things that can make boats go slower, and they don't need to be there. And that would be my message to athletes and to anyone is that just try and really understand, like, is what you're focusing on that important? Because if it's not, and it's not going to make the boat go faster, then why are you doing it? Yeah. And that, Ben Hunt Davis, they had a great culture in that crew, and that's why they achieved that success. And in London, it was amazing, right? London, the Olympic venue is like 25-minute drive down the road from here, from my house. That's a pretty special thing. And when you're paddling around in the warm-up and you see your neighbor or the local window cleaner, and they're there and they're shouting out your name, go on, Alex, or it makes me pretty emotional now to remember those moments. I tell a story about the day of the Olympic final when we walked into the Olympic Park, and we went through our special entrance, which is down the river in Windsor. And I put my bag through the checkout, the scanner to get in the park, and the Royal Marines were working there, and this guy had like a little bit of a like that, and I kind of was like, all right. And then I walked through the scanner, and I saw ahead of me, and it was about 150 volunteers in a long line. This is about 6:15 in the morning, in a long line up to the bridge where we'd cross over into the lake. And they would just gave us the standing ovation as we, walk down that line. And I'm getting teary-eyed talking about it now. Yeah. I can tell you then I was, I had my sunglasses on for a reason. And if I can feel that emotional energy that I feel now, I can tell you what, it was 1,000 times what I'm feeling right now. And there was no choice in the matter of what you were racing for. You had no choice but to race for gold or nothing else, because you owed it to everyone that was there, that was doing this amazing thing for the London Olympics. And I so wish the London Olympics were now to kind of re-energize this country, because it just created the most amazing energy and positivity in people. And maybe that's what we need, now. But I remember that moment. And the night before, it's been building up all week, and we basically talked the night before the race. And there was, the 10 of us, the 11 of us sat in this room, and we talked about what it meant to us. And, you got guys 6'8" plus, got tears in their eyes, and their hearts are on the table. And we made this choice to try and do something the next day that we'd not done, we just not done before, which was to go for the win or nothing at all. We made the choice to be in the lead by 500 or 1,000 and to keep going until we were in the lead, because that's the only way we could beat the Germans. And we made a choice to do something that no one had done before for the last 4 years, because no one had done it to the Germans. And so that's a pretty terrifying thing to make a choice of the night before the Olympic final, because, by the way, there is no other Olympic final after the next day. It's that's it. But we made that commitment to each other. And the commitment was, I'm going to take the 10 hardest strokes of my life. And then when I finish those, I'm going to then take the next 10 hardest strokes I can possibly take of my life. And I'm just going to keep doing that until we're in the lead. Maybe there, maybe another 4 years later, and experience in the same crew, we would have been able to hold that form, in through the last 500, and quite a few of those guys went on to do that, in Rio. I think what happened is we got in the lead in 1,000, and we were then neck and neck, and we were going pretty well. And as you entered into that huge funnel of noise, in the Olympic stands, and it had happened in heat and the rep. And unless you've done Olympic Games in that kind of amphitheater, it's difficult to explain it or to get someone prepared for it. But it's so loud. It shakes the boat. It shakes everything. And to maintain your form, you have to be so composed and to not I think as we entered into that, you know, the emotions that you're feeling, the exhaustion that you're feeling, you know, the boat just kind of fell apart, and then the wheels really started coming off, and as we were getting closer and closer to the line, you know, I'm in the bow seat and I'm like literally counting every single stroke as we were in that last 250. And I can see the whole field just coming back at us. I know the Germans are gone. I can see the Canadians like flying through on the inside, on the other side. And I see like America, Holland, Australia, you know, everyone's flying back. And we crossed the line, and it went first Germany, second Canada, and then no results came up. And I was like, nothing came up for about a minute and a half, something like that, 2 minutes. And I just thought, we did it. We went for gold, and we've come away with nothing. And then the result came up the board, and it was the bronze. And you know what? It's damn sight better walking away with a bronze medal than coming in fourth. Because at least you get something, you know. And it's taken me, I think it has taken me 6 years, 7 years to kind of appreciate that, you know what, bronze is not gold, but you know, it's still a good result. So yeah, there you go. There's my story of London 2012.
That's compelling. It's really compelling to listen to, Alex. There was just before, I know in that season before 2012, you were it's very close between you and TJ for who was going to be in that four. You've been in the four. You'd won a gold medal in 2009 in Poznan. I know, you know, that 2010 the lanes were unfair. You didn't get the result that the season's performance merited. But it was between you and TJ, and you took the decision on training camp, I think, to basically go for the 8 rather than stay in the mixing pot for the 4 for selection.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Yeah. So retrospectively, so in 2012, I wanted to. What I wanted to do is I wanted to cross the finish line in London, and I wanted to have no regrets. I wanted to have no stone unturned from myself in terms of a physical performance and a mental performance. And I wanted to dictate my destiny. I wanted to dictate, you know, when I crossed that line, I didn't want it to be down to somebody else's decision on selection or anything like that. So I made 2 decisions. I made one decision. I said, I'm going to win. I'm going to win an Olympic gold medal or do the absolute best with anyone that I'm put with in any boat class that I'm in, whether I'm in the pair, the 4, or the 8, doesn't matter. And I had a great year. I had a really, really good year physically. I think Alex and I were a little bit unlucky at trials. I'm not saying we would have beaten Andy and Pete in that year, but I think we would have potentially been a lot closer in the final trials. He was ill. And then we went through a kind of a period where both Andy and Alex were kind of ill or injured for quite a few weeks. And then we went on training camp and so the selection wasn't finalized between me and TJ. And I felt I was in great condition. I'd done everything I needed to do to be selected, and everyone else had been selected except for me and TJ. And you know, this really played on my mind a lot over that 6 weeks because it was incredibly frustrating. I just felt like time was being wasted getting ready for the Olympics. And then we got to Varese. Even for Varese, we were putting the boats together, and still wasn't told what boat I was. You know, we weren't being told what was happening. And then I think it was late one night on either the first or the second night of training camp, Jürgen got us together and he said, right, tomorrow you're going to do a pairs matrix. And it's going to be you and TJ, Alex, and with Andy and Alex. And then whoever wins that pairs matrix is going to be in the 4. And I just thought, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. Because I felt that the consistency between Andy and Alex, having been ill and injured for that amount of time, wasn't a fair trial. And I just didn't want to go to the Olympic Games based on, you know, maybe I would have won, maybe TJ would have won. I mean, TJ is a phenomenal oarsman, and, you know, he's quite rightly won 2 Olympic gold medals. So maybe I wasn't good enough, but I felt like I'd done enough to be selected. And I just didn't want to to go to the situation where, let's say, even if I had lost it, that I was uncomfortable with that bit of selection. So I just said, do you know what? It's fine. If you wanted to select me, he would have selected me already. So
yeah.
I just said, look, I'm going to go for the 8. I think the 8's got a really great chance of winning. And you know, that's my decision. And that was it.
And how do you view that now?
I think they had a tough season, right? You know, they didn't go fast straight away. And they weren't really rowing that well until the end of the season. And I know that a large reason of why they managed to turn things around was the way that Alex and TJ got everyone to sit down and look at how they were rowing. And what TJ is excellent at doing is creating an environment where that conversation has to be had, but can be had in a really balanced way. And I think, compared to me, I get pretty intense, and I can certainly back then I can let the emotion, you know, sway how I wanted to work through those things. And I think potentially I wouldn't have been able to do what TJ and Alex did in those last 4 weeks to turn their rowing around. And so I think retrospectively it was, you know, the right decision. But I think the other thing that when I look back, is that, and this would be my message to athletes now, is that there was a lot of pride. You know, I had a lot of pride in my decision making. Me. I'm going to make sure me. But the reality is that sometimes you need to just swallow that pride and follow the process. And especially when you got someone like Jürgen who's running the ship, and the process is pretty significantly proven. And I think that's what Alex Gregory has done incredibly well, and why he was such a great athlete is that he was very good at following the process, and he knew that if he had Jürgen in his corner, he was gonna win. Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about some great rowing names. Do you have you know, this is a difficult question and there may not be an answer to it, but do you have, like, you know, who's the best guy that you've rowed with or been in the boat with? Do you have a sense of that now?
That's a pretty tough question, because I rowed a lot of people. It's you, Martin. No one as silky as Martin Cross in a Balsi. I've rowed with some amazing people. I've rowed with some amazing people post the squad. I have to say, one of the best people I've ever rowed with in my career is Mark Weber from Germany. He stroked R8 and he's just got an incredible, I just don't even know how you would describe it, for his size, and just the way he moves a boat is just amazing. I was really lucky to be able to row with both Hodgie and Constantine Andrew Hodge and Constantine Laludis, and then also Alex Gregory, and they were all just phenomenal, all in slightly different ways. And then, you know, with Matt and James and Stevie, so it's really tough, really tough. Yeah. I would say there's probably 2 people that are kind of unsung heroes in my rowing career, and I will give them a shout out. I actually did juniors with Robin Bourne-Taylor. Robin Bourne-Taylor was also, you know, in the 8 with me in 2003. So we rowed together for many years, and he was an incredible fighter, and one of the things that he taught me is how you always back yourself. And he just had this ferocity and determination in his training, and the way he would race, and the way that he could end himself physically, you know, that was just awesome. So that's one. And then the other one is, unfortunately, his rowing career was cut short, is a guy called Ben Birch, who was in the 8 with us in 2002. He was president of the boat race in 2002 for Oxford. And, you know, he had terrible back problems. But that 8, up until Ben and Robin both got in it, was all over the place, and it was a complete mess. And then when I talk about leaders as athletes, you know, what Ben and Robin were able to do was to galvanize that group of people and create a shared purpose, the belief in each other that was immense. And I think that, you know, rowing is about lots of different things. It's about, you know, athleticism and your physiology and technique, but it's also about that. It's about that leadership to drive and believe in something beyond what you think you can do, and that's why you get results that are greater than the sum of the parts.
That's and what about, you know, the best crew you've rowed in? Do you look back and you have a particular favourite crew, or you go that this was really outstanding? Can you do that at all? Because you've been in so many great crews.
So I reckon my favourite crew was definitely the 8 from 2008. They were, you know, it was just awesome. You know, you had like Josh West, you know, PhD genius, Tom Stallard, you know, Formula One race engineer now with McLaren, and then you had, you know, sadly we've lost him now, Asa Nethercott, this super brain, and then you had me, and you had Tom Lucy, who literally just wanted to go and shoot guns at people in the Marines, and, you know, and Al Heathcote, one of the greatest characters in rowing. It was loads of fun. Rick Eggington, Matt Langridge, Colin Smith, you know, that was just a great crew, and that was really cool to be part of that underdog journey. But then also I was in that 4 with Langridge and Rick and Alex, and that was some of the best rowing and technical rowing. And I mean, some of those races in Lucerne, we just won by so far, you know, it was just awesome. So yeah, no, those were great crews and great fun.
Yeah.
But best race ever, 2001 semi-final of the Visitors Cup. Oxford Brooks with Tommy Burton, Gareth Corey, and James Brown and myself against Danny Marrett, Dan Ousley, Angus Warner, and Angus Rivers.
Oh,
and
wow.
we won by a foot. And I think we were rating 47 down the enclosure, having gone below 41 for the first 3 quarters of the course. So anyway.
Did you win? One thing I wanted to say, because I know you're a family man, Alex. You're very much a family man now. And how important is family to you? How important has family been to you through this, you know, the process we talked about when we started out chatting?
Family's everything. You know, I probably didn't recognize that as well as I should have in my early days as being a parent, because I was, you know, still focusing very hard on the rowing and probably too self-focused. But now, you know, like, it gives me no greater pleasure to try and teach my kids and inspire them that they can do things that they didn't think were possible, or to you know, get their horizons, that anything is possible. And I just love, like, jumping. If they say, you know, we want to go climb up Penny Fan, we'll jump in the car and go climb up Penny Fan. You know, if they say they want to go and do it, you know, a 5-10K run, and, you know, which we did with all of them before the age of 5, you know, all right, let's go. You know, they swam in the river with me this weekend, you know. Yeah, you know, and it's about breaking down those barriers and helping them recognize that anything's possible. Yeah, so family's everything.
Wow. And, you know, in terms, you mentioned in the future you're going to be a mentor in the True Athlete Project. I mean, how's the future looking for you? What are you looking forward to in the future?
So I work at the moment. I work with I work with WageStream. We're a social enterprise fintech, and basically we're trying to help improve the poverty premium by helping people avoid having to enter the cycle of debt. But what's really cool is, like, it's a social purpose business, and the future for me is I want to help society. You know, I want to help people. As long as I'm doing that, I'm okay. And there's so much that we can do, whether it's just inspiring, you know, 10 local parents to go on a sunrise run, and that's free, to, you know, really complicated technology that helps people access their pay in real time. I mean, it's great to just be involved in things that improve society. And that's why I love what you're doing, Crossy, because, you know, you're helping pass on messages about rowing and all around the world. And and sharing that knowledge is awesome, because the sport just gets better for it.
Yeah. Alex Partridge, it's been amazing. I can't believe we've been over an hour actually talking. Thank you very much for the experience. Thanks very much for everybody tuning in. Thanks for your comments as well. We'll end the live part of this broadcast now, but just to say, Alex Partridge, you are an absolute legend and hero. Thank you ever so much.
You are too, Crossy. You are too. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a great Christmas, and looking forward to a better 2021.